Hello, good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Good morning. I'm Kayla Megwa.
It's the 28th day in the month of August, 2024. I'm Ayo Makine. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Okay, so lovely morning today, 23 degrees centigrade here in Abuja, and elsewhere you've got equally lovely scenery. Where are we going today? Kebi or where?
We're going to Argungu.
Okay.
We're in Kebbi State this morning. Good morning, Kebbi. What's the weather like? How are you doing? Lovely city. Have you been to Kebbi before, Chamberlain? Have you been to Kebbi?
What's that got to do with this guy?
Have you been to Kebbi? Ayo, good morning, no Jerry. Have you been to Kebbi?
We're in Kebi right now.
Have you gone there?
We are in Kebi.
They've invited us for Argungu Fishing Festival. Are we going
you
for
did?
the next one? Yes.
We didn't know they invited
Yeah,
you. Should have said so earlier.
you. They said us, everyone.
Go straight to the point. Tell us all you. Yeah, that didn't invite. You didn't tell us. You.
Okay. So while we discuss whether we're going for the Argungu Fishing Festival or not, we're taking you right there now to the palace of the Emir of Argungu. It's in Kebbi State, like we said earlier. Very cultural landmark. Rich history of the Argungu Emirate. Very many expansions. It's old. I get it. You're looking at the roof. It's old, right? But they've had several expansions on this palace, especially in the 19th century. They put a lot of Islamic architectural influences there. So those are some of the arcs that you're seeing in between the buildings. And it recognizes, the British colonial administration recognized this palace's importance, and they did so many renovations in the mid-20th century. Modern amenities. Now it is the symbol of Argungu's cultural heritage, and blending traditional and Islamic architectural styles. Continues to serve as the Emir's residence and a center for cultural and religious events. And they're looking forward to having Chamberlain, myself, Ayo, and the entire Sunrise Daily crew come to Argungu for their festival and visit this palace.
I almost said it's fake news.
It's not fake news.
But
It's not fake news.
I'll hold on. I won't say that. I mean, nothing wrong with old. Nothing wrong with old. I mean, we recognize it here in the country. So basically, that counts for a lot. So we also need to relish and cherish our own landmarks, historical sites.
Oh, yeah.
Those are areas that I think eventually Ministry of Tourism, they're trying to see what they can do and collect all of these sites to make it very interesting for us all, as we also try to improve security in the country such that people can go there without worrying about different scenarios in different parts of the country. Because look, we've got lovely places, lovely sites in this country that we can cherish, but I have to make it accessible to a lot of people.
So Ayo, let's play that game we like to play.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh.
Do you know what Argungu means?
Here you go again.
What's going on this morning?
Just tell us already. Come on.
What's happening here?
We've been doing this quite a bit. So we'll go to a place. Every place has a meaning. And Argungu actually got his name from Ayigungu. Ayigungu, which means let us gather in one place. The fishing call. Ayigungu, let's gather in one place. Or from Armangungu, the pagan people of Gungu town.
So almost short form of Ayo.
Ayo, talk to us. What movie are you looking at this morning?
Oh my God. I don't even know where you guys are. What you guys have taken there. Are you taking some cup of coffee this morning? Come on, guys. Anyway, no doubt it's a very, very beautiful sight. I mean, looking at that palace from, right above, I'm wondering, are you sure this is not as big as a football stadium? But hey, maybe when we check it out, again, it's actually a very, very beautiful and lovely thing. And to imagine, Kayla, that this dates back, as you told us, to pre-independence. In fact, the first historical references concerning this palace or the emirate in Kebbi goes back into the 1400s, and that is quite something. And there are a number of localities in our country like that, that they continue to maintain their bespoke nature even in this century, and that is something that should really be celebrated. So here is the Emir's Palace in Argungu in Kebbi State. And that name Argungu, even if you forgot it, you can't forget the fishing festival. So, and as for the trip you're making, Kayla, I'm waiting for that memo. Once I get the memo, then maybe we can begin to talk about, that trip. In the meantime, don't
our
forget that
calabashes are ready, because the way they do that fishing is that they do it with calabashes. And so they put the calabash and then you lie on top of it with your stomach, and then you put the net in and then you start,
Chamberlain.
Yes, our calabashes are ready.
Chamberlain, what's
Let's see
Kayla?
how to do it first, and then
Exactly.
let's lead by example with this fishing style.
Who is leading?
Because
Chamberlain.
you received the idea.
Chamberlain, tell me something. What's Kayla doing right there with you in the studio? She ought to be in Argungu right now, preparing the ground for us.
I'm sending her there right after this.
Argungu.
Okay, in the meantime.
For this festival, when the festival happens, that's when I want to go. And the other times I don't want to.
Just don't break the traffic rule.
It's a traffic
One
rule.
way.
Yes. Chamberlain,
Yeah.
talking about
Okay, good
traffic.
story.
That's what we see them do these days.
Talking about traffic rules that you just talked about, okay, Chamberlain, and I saw a video shortly before we came on air of a young man in Ajah area of Lagos who took it upon himself to stop people driving against traffic, including the tricycles. And guess what? Then you see this one. Then you see a siren-bearing vehicle such as this. I'm not sure I noted the number plate to see whether or not it's indeed a government vehicle. But this gentleman took it upon himself, and he was very, very, insistent that you guys had to go back. And it just reminds me of something, Chamberlain and Kayla. The fact that we've been talking about people driving against traffic, especially the enforcement of the siren rule. It has a siren sound. And it has the light that we know to be ascribed only, set aside only for emergencies. And then you see this. It's very, very shocking and appalling. As far back as 2012, the IGP made an announcement and said all sirens that are illegal, that are not supposed to be, should not be, be used by anyone. The question you want to ask is, who is monitoring these things? 2014, there was an editorial by a newspaper saying, no, this thing hasn't been dealt with, and even called out the FRSC. 2020, the same thing. The issue is still on the front burner, and now this. In fact, recently, I think it was the House of Representatives that made an announcement and insisted that the right thing needed to be done by the authorities. And we're still talking about this. It is really, I don't know, who is supposed, when the Inspector General of Police, the chief policeman of the country, makes an announcement, and there is no one to enforce it, not even his men. In fact, sometimes there are those who believe that even policemen and security agencies, security operatives, they use these sirens willy-nilly simply because they have the privileges. So who is going to police the police? Chamberlain, Kayla.
It's one of the most irresponsible things I've ever seen in my life. So wait, he looked like he was threatening the guy. He was like, I'm gonna hit you.
It just tells you that there's still people out there.
Hit you.
People out there who are sick and tired of certain people who, quote unquote, have this toga of these privileges, just flout the rules and the laws because they think they can. So way to go. And it was also good to see that he didn't use, the stick he had to smash
the car. And of course, the guy didn't back down.
Very good.
I think citizen action is becoming important these days. Let's embarrass a few people. Let's get some number plates out there, because you can't do that. You can't live like that. You cannot be breaking the rule and be someone that is supposed to be a person who enforces rules. And then apart from that, just generally, it's unruly. Unruly behavior is no more attractive. No one is interested in people being high-handed and unable to follow rules and regulation. The growing number of people who want our country to become better, it's a massive number that is growing, and I'm really excited about that. So let's get more people do citizen action. Call people out when they break the rules like that. Bring out your phone, film it, go on Facebook Live. It's enough. We have to get people to be more responsible. And we're teaching people bad behavior. We're enabling bad behavior when we watch people break rules like this, and then we just let them go ahead with it as though it's Nigeria. No, it's not Nigeria. Let's get our country back.
And unfortunately, too, some persons were injured yesterday as BRT buses collided late yesterday in Lagos. So keeping tabs on that one and hoping that, because I mean, it was not too long ago as well that there was also an incident in Lagos where the buses tumbled. And so hoping that the authorities will ensure that they do what they can to make sure that the roads are safe for people to apply and ensure things go on. So we're also keeping tabs with security agencies to see if they are calling resident doctors to the table, if they are doubling up or doing something about their action to rescue those who were kidnapped. Yeah, we're also keeping tabs on that one. They began their strike, so we looked at that yesterday. They really intent on ensuring that their colleague who was kidnapped is released. So all of those things we're watching. But for now, let's take you through some of the papers this morning. Ayo.
Insecurity seems to lead the issues this morning on the front pages of the papers. Look at the front page of the New Telegraph. Can Sultan seek end to bloodshed abductions in Nigeria? Condemn farmers' killing in Niger, abduction of 150 people in Sokoto, fret over exponential rise in level of insecurity, urge Nigerians to be cautious, vigilant, report suspicious activities. All these issues are right there on the inside pages of New Telegraph newspaper today. Front page of Vanguard newspaper has a similar story. Agony in Saudis as kidnappers lay siege on communities. And the writers on the front page give you certain ideas of what the story will be about on page 5 of the paper this morning. The front page of the Nigerian Tribune, end killings, banditry, can Sultan urge FG, say recent bloodshed alarming. All of this you'll find details of on page 3 of the paper. Insecurity, that's the front page of the Daily Times newspaper. Kaduna residents flee to urban centers as abductions rise in hinterlands. IGP urges citizens' collaboration. Details on the inside pages of the paper. The Guardian newspaper leads with $48 per barrel production cost drowns 60% of Nigeria's oil earnings. That story is on page 6. Some details you find on the front page in that infographic of production cost per barrel by country, and a number of countries are listed right there. The Daily Trust newspaper has Mpox spreads to 19 states, cases now 40. Lagos raises alarm over new variant from African nations. FG intensifies surveillance as US donates 10,000 vaccine doses to Nigeria. Details of that story on the inside pages of the paper today. The front page of the Daily Independent has this one. Nigeria moves to avoid international economic penalties, restrictive measures, vows to exit terrorist financing countries list by May 2025. Says country has 9 months left to exit grey list deadline. Details are on the inside pages of the paper today. Look at the front page of Blueprint newspaper. Without MSME, 80% Nigerians will be jobless. That's from Shetima. Planned Tinubu's China trip to attract $3 trillion investments. That's from the presidency. IMF hinges 3.1% economic growth on reforms. And the front page of the Nigerian Observer has FG's SSCE tertiary education entry age policy divides Nigerians as netizens discuss pros, cons of policy. ASU, NUT differ. The front page of Business Day, ENI Owando's PD approval questions lingering divestments. What that means, you'll find details of on the front page, and it continues on the inside pages of the paper. These are some of the papers we have for you today.
Okay, so let's start off with this one, Mpox. From the Daily Trust newspaper today, Mpox spreads to 19 states. There are now 40 cases of Mpox. I think in Abuja there was a handover of vaccines. I think 10,000 vaccines were handed over to the primary healthcare office here. And of course, the United States donated those 10,000 vaccines to us. but it's something that a lot of people have to be very, very careful about. I think recently, I think Lagos state government have been hearing really checking about, Mpox cases. And yesterday they said they didn't have any active Mpox cases in Lagos state. I don't know what's happening in Abuja though. We have a health office. There's a health secretariat. There's a lot of health things that happen in the FCT. Who's in charge? Who's speaking to us? What are we dealing with here? Statements are not enough. Maybe do press briefings or come out and do interviews and talk more about how you're tracking this situation in the nation's capital. And that goes for other states that we haven't heard from. I've heard from a few places, but I don't seem to hear a lot because this figure here, 19 states. So at least 19 governments should be speaking up right now. That 40 cases. Let's see what's going on. Let's do a tracker on it. Let's see how we can handle it so it doesn't spread into something that we cannot control. But more on that from page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
All right, let's hear. Ayo, what do you think of all of this?
Well, it's very interesting that, we're even highlighting the issue of the health issues again. I go back to something that we have heard on this program a number of times, that it's the Environment Ministry, be it at the federal or state levels, that are supposed to prevent these things one way or the other. But it would seem like we wait until these things happen before we get into the firefighting mode. And this isn't really good for us. 19 states already, and how many to go? So what preventive measures have been taken by us is very, very concerning. And to imagine that right now we have 40 people affected, they are not just figures. They are Nigerians, they are people with families. And if anything would happen to them, then we understand that things are going to get worse. And to imagine that Lagos has raised this alarm, of course, let's hope that the right thing is being done right now to prevent lives and property. Another issue of concern, Chamberlain and Kayla, which is also on the front page this morning, is something you'll find on the front page of the Daily Independent, and it's at the bottom of the page, that 2 years after commissioning Ekiti 20 billion naira airport yet to take off. 2 years after commissioning. I saw a report earlier that says about 160 billion naira has been spent on unviable airports in states in the country. Question is, who is asking the questions about this? I'm talking about the Daily Independent, actually. Stakeholders worry over 90% airports are not self-sustaining. Say they are constructed only for political reasons, and that is concerning. So what's to say? Who is there to let us know that this is not going to happen again? So money has been wasted. These things are right there on the front pages. Every day the issues are being raised. And here we are again saying they're even yet to take off. Some of the ones that have taken off are shut down from time to time for what? Maintenance. And more money is perhaps still going to be spent to maintain these unviable airports. So who is asking the questions? Money has been expended. Can we put them to use so they don't go to waste altogether? Is there a benefit to building airports in your country, in your state, especially when they are not viable? What's the justification for building airports in these states? These questions need to be asked by everyone in each state, particularly civil society organizations. That's my take this morning, Chamberlain.
Lots of food for thoughts from all of you, but yeah, very interesting, and we're hoping that the authorities will keep notes and ensure. Sometimes you just wonder that these things appear to be very basic and straight to the point, but these days, nothing is ever straightforward from what we see. But don't go away yet. Remember, the Patriots are doubling down on their call for a new constitution. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Stay on with us. Okay. Turns out we can't get that report. The Patriots also spoke up yesterday as well in terms of their intention to go ahead and get a new constitution. We've got Mr. Chima Naji joining us virtually this morning. He's a legal practitioner. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Mr. Naji, can you hear us?
Okay, I can hear you. It's a bit faint, actually.
Oh, okay.
But I can hear you.
All right.
Yes.
This, the Patriots is not the first time they've met the president, National Assembly. They submitted documents there, so they're moving on with their quest to ensure that this is done. But of course, you always have people who wonder if this is going to see the light of day, if it's not a fruitless exercise So, as a lawyer who's been operating the Constitution, what is your impression about this call?
A very good morning, Chamberlain and your crew, and good morning to our viewers all over the world. Well, there's always been this saying, if you try the first time, it doesn't work, try again. I think Nigerians generally are beginning to appreciate the necessity for a new constitution or another constitution. Let me just put it that way, other than what we are operating now. It is a valid call. It has always been valid, but the understanding and misunderstanding have been the major setbacks. And I believe in the light of what is happening now, showing that Nigeria is not working the way it's supposed to work, we probably will get some mileage. You see, Chamberlain, the structure sets the function. If in the wisdom of God, he framed man with skeleton before putting flesh, then you will understand that every country, when we talk about constitution, must have a framework within which all the functions of government, interrelationship between government and people, between people, and between the country and the other countries will be defined. And that is the ground norm, as it is said. What we have now, like so many people have canvassed this fact, that it's almost like a fraud. When you carry somebody's name, it's misrepresentation, it's impersonation to say that my father sent me to do something when my father's buy-in or instruction was never procured. So those people who did the constitution that we are working now, that have become an albatross to this country because of the fact that it was not thought through. If you don't have input of people, you cannot tell me where it itches more than myself that is experiencing it. That's why people are talking about a constitution that is hammered out by ethnic nationalities, professional bodies, and all the Nigerian constituents to make sure that every interest, because politics is supposed to be an aggregation of interest, and nationhood must have the buy-in of every citizen for you to talk about patriotism. And what a coincidence that those people who are now resurrecting it, because it has been there, are the patriots. So I think it is a very valid call. Now that, in fact, it is very, very urgent. Now that we have, from experience, seen that Nigeria is not working and cannot work because we are not moving in the right direction. You cannot tell me you are going to Enugu and I find you going towards Badagry. You can never get to Enugu.
So, but Mr. Najamin, you say it's urgent because the country is not working, but you still have those who think, they wonder why this is of that importance and urgent. Now, after all, is it the constitution that made politicians always manipulate election results, not allowing Nigerians elect people who they actually want and rigging elections? If we even get that part right alone, we won't be talking about even new constitution, because, I mean, persons who want to genuinely change this country would have been in different seats in different parts of the country.
My dear, that is a very faulty reasoning. And faulty reasoning leads to faulty argument. Because if God created man with 5 fingers, you cannot execute in a plate of soup what 10 fingers can do with 5 fingers, because the limit has been set. So the Constitution sets the limit. Leadership is the outcome of the constitutional framework. If you have a bucket of water, you cannot pour beyond the capacity of that bucket. And the water must take the shape of that bucket, whether it's cylindrical or rectangular or what have you. Whatever the geometric shape of that particular container, that's the shape the water will take. So the country's constitution shapes things. Like I said, structure determines function. So the leadership of America cannot be like the leadership of Nigeria, because the institutions are strengthened and they are worked. It's not by accident The Constitution says, thou shalt not kill, except where there is an excusable circumstance. Otherwise, you would have seen people killing more than now, because people are killing now, but they are hiding in the killing, and they are working against the system to contrive a situation where they become free. But if it was that the Constitution did not set limit to how to control murder and all that, you would have seen people doing that openly. There are so many people who are hindered by law, not because they are gentlemen, but they don't want the consequences of the outcome. But those who have the capacity to write short the system are the ones engaging in the impunity. So there is absolutely need now more than ever to have a new workable constitution. For example, my position is, look at the local governments. Yes, we are celebrating that the autonomy has been given to local government, but in the new constitution, there should be a need to liberalize local government creation and make local government to be subject to states. If you want to create 100 local governments in your own state as the administrative centers, that's your business. Remove it from the constitution, because the relationship between the federal government should be between the states, the two-tier. I have not seen a three-tier federation that works. It cannot work. Our own system was hammered out by the military because they didn't think through, and it was contrived. And I use that word very advisedly and responsibly. It was contrived, and it is no longer working because the fixation was on revenue allocation and not on administrative benefits to the people in terms of development. Go around. Some states that have 100 local governments that have been split into two. No development there. They have been sharing the money. So if we hammer out a new constitution that is beneficial to every segment of this country, Nigeria will blossom in few months.
Well, if we go take a look at some of the demands, the highlights of the Patriots' call for this new constitution, which some people still have a lot of questions, which you will get to see sooner. But before that, while that is coming up, let me also ask you, what is not in this current constitution that you think will be in the new one that will make any difference?
First and foremost, it will have the buy-in of the greatest majority of Nigerians. Who will own it? Chamberlain, if you do not have belief, conviction that a law is made to protect your interests, you can only obey that law by enforcement, not by willing compliance. You will not. So this constitution is not working for many Nigerians. In fact, it is working against many Nigerians, and that is wrong. Now you have a behemoth called the federal government. It should not be so. The size is bloating, and that gives the larger-than-life impression to anybody who is at the presidency, because so many others will begin to chant that you are next to God, you are next to God, and somebody will now have a bloated sense of self, and that at the end of the day, nothing happens because you are sucking in the self-adulations and so on. Now, there are a lot of areas that need to be shared to the state as a second tier, as main tier of the federation, because the local governments are supposed to be under state governments, so that you will be removed from the constitution. The frenetic way the local governments were added into the constitution shows that there was some mischief that some people were up to. And you can see that is not working. It has become part of the albatross. Now, the states are not making any progress either, because they find reasons to look for who to blame for their own failures. So if you give somebody more responsibility, the person becomes more responsible. But if you now give him the opportunity to give reasons, then he will give reasons. That is the natural thing. So what we are saying is this constitution has so much areas that should be divested and devolved to the states, so that the states the state governors will become more responsible, and more serious individuals will come to governance. Because when you have excess money, then you fritter it away. Just take, for instance, a man who was just given his salary, and the wife has not made demand on him about school fees, rent, and all that. He goes to the beer parlor to share beer to his friends, only to lament when the time for payment comes. But if he has the awareness that these are responsibilities that are awaiting him, that he must discharge them, by the time he will share his budget, he will no longer even visit any beer parlor. So these are the issues. You can see so much money is being stolen, not because we don't have reason what to do with that money, but because people who have responsibility to discharge to the Nigerian people are not doing so. So the money lies idle and somebody fritters it away.
Mr. Chimanaji, let's talk a little bit more about what the granular issues are. It's interesting, when this conversation came up, a lot of things were said. And one of those things is, the reason why you're seeing the excesses and, the misbehavior and the stealings like you've been talking about is because of abuse of already laid down rules. If we can just focus on getting the already existing constitution to work, there won't be need for a new one. What do you make of that?
Yes, that is reasonable. But is it the true position? There are certain areas that power relationship need to be clearly defined. And like one of them is to remove the local government from being a third tier. This is an anomaly. Okay? Now, once you focus on the two-tier system...
I need to understand that. Because, we've been asking for that third tier because we wanted them to be more financially independent.
That is exactly what I'm saying.
We want to be able to... Hold on, sir. We want to be able to use the local government system to handle a lot of the issues we're facing in the country, hence the need for the independence, terrorism, empowerment, human capital development. These are things that we felt that the local government areas will be able to handle if they're given the autonomy that they need. They've been given that autonomy, but you seem to be against that right now.
Well, it's not just that I'm against it. Is it working presently? All the allocations given to these local governments, some of the local governments, you don't see the chairman. They just come towards the end of the month once the allocation has been collected and either disappear to overseas or in Abuja. The point I'm making is that if you make the state governors more responsible, they will be more responsive to the yearnings of the people. And the structure, like I said, determines function. If the two-tier arrangement is, as it is known the world over in federation, that we have federal government and the state government. Now, the local governments will be subservient to the governor of the state. And the governor of the state will now know that he has more responsibilities to develop the local government because there will be more demand.
But isn't that what it was before, Mr. Naji?
Complex.
Isn't that what it was before? Isn't that what the issue was? We didn't want that to happen. Hence the need for the calls that led to the independence of the local governments, especially...
There was no call for that. It was the military in 1976 that started this, what we are doing now. And ever since, because those who benefit from the old order don't like it to change. And even those people who are benefiting from the old order now are finding it difficult because it is also working against them. Because if you have siblings and every time as a glutton, you clear their own meal, sometimes you will suffer from obesity or some other
you make
problems.
These examples when we're talking about a national situation. You bring an example that is, very.
This is the example I give you now is apt because if you
these are simple examples. They don't play out exactly the same way on a larger scale. But I want to be able to get your thoughts on something else, though. When it comes to a new constitution, because we're clear here that it's not a review of the old constitution. What people want, right? At least what the patriots and people like yourself want is a brand new constitution. Just so I'm correct, yes?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you well.
Do you want it, just so we're clear? You're not looking for a review of the 1999 constitution. You want a brand new constitution. Are we correct in assuming this?
If it becomes necessary for a brand new, fine. But if there has to be a congregation of people to look at the current constitution and have a holistic amendment. It's still the same thing, but it is not workable as we are now looking at it.
Okay.
We will need to remove, my own position is that we will need to remove local government from the constitution.
Okay.
Let every state create its own, if you like, call it development center and so on, because this is way of frittering away our national patrimony. There's no reason why you have inequity in the local government distribution as it was and cannot be changed, because as it is now, it's cast on stone, constitutionally speaking.
Okay.
So the issue is, even those ones that have been benefiting from the profligacy, they are not developing the areas because it's now giving room for people to contest or do everything to carry that money away. And the people are left more impoverished.
Okay.
You talk
So
about
let's talk a little bit about the process that this will be involved here. Just so, will it involve the National Assembly being, in agreement with you for this new constitution?
In fact, what the Patriots are doing now, I think they are working on the buying-in process, getting the National Assembly. It's not going to be a tea party, because sometimes even a little baby, if you remove the little baby's mouth from the mother's breast, it starts crying.
I'm asking you about the National Assembly's involvement, because what are the chances?
That is just listen to my drift. I'm an elder,
okay.
So I use words, I use parables sometimes to leverage my thought. So when I say that the little baby can cry if you remove the mouth from the mother's breast, it means that that little baby is enjoying something that you are trying to remove it from. So the National Assembly members are enjoying certain perks that they may not want to be the source of truncating it. So, and if a particular state is in inertia, you need an external force to bring it to move. So that force is what we are saying, convene a national conference or whatever that will involve ethnic nationalities, professional bodies, including the National Assembly members, to bring in their thoughts, to see once and for all areas that the constitution can be tinkered or a brand new can be brought in, and of course the legal framework by which it can be adopted will be hammered out. That is the point we are making. It's not something that is being forced on anybody.
So as an elder
of everybody.
Yes. So as an elder, if you're looking at a situation where you're going to do something that may affect me negatively, or remove food from my mouth, or like you said, take away this breast milk that I'm enjoying, why should I buy into it? How are you going to get me to believe you?
Very, very, very good question. Mothers know that they don't have the mouth of their children on their breast forever. They know that they can use some other things to compensate them. And even as they grow up, they wean them from breastfeeding by telling them the other sources of what you are enjoying. That is the point we are making.
That's a very interesting plan, and I hope it actually works out.
Let me tell you,
so
happiness is derivative.
Who's going to
happiness
convene
is
this?
Derivative. If your neighbor is not happy and you are happy, you cannot be absolutely happy.
Who's going to convene this Congress? Who's going to do the convening in your view? Is it the president? Is it going to be where is the convening going to be done from?
My dear, you see the effort the Patriots and other well-meaning Nigerians are making now show that it's not a coup that is being advocated. It has to have the buy-in of even the present government. Good thing, the present president has been in the forefront as a democratic proponent that there should be some changes and so on. Well, I know that the view of the road changes when you move from the passengers to driver's seat. Maybe that is what is holding him. But I know that he's completely aware of why this should happen. Many other Nigerians are beginning to see why this should happen. If you have been doing one thing, the same thing, the same time, the same thing every time, and it is not working, what do you think that should happen? You must try another option. That is progress. That is being progressive.
So, Mr. Naji, can you tell us how will allowing the governors create any amount of local governments they want, how will that stop the profligacy, which people say has been the bane of the system?
For example, there is inequity in the distribution of local governments now. So equality is equity. That's a legal maxim. If you have 36 states, if you look at the distribution of local government, the way they were created by the military, and then they are made to participate in the national patrimony by way of revenue allocation, then you see so many other states or areas are excluded from access to the national patrimony, not even in an equitable manner in which they contribute. So if you have states on an equal basis, fine, no problem, as the federating units. Now, if you want to develop your own state, you must think, and that's the responsibility I'm talking about, that the state governors will now have become more cerebral rather than visceral, the way we are now. The system encourages corruption, sharing of money, and bickering at the end of the day. But if you have a state that says, okay, I can do with 10 local governments, then you create development centers, and the important thing is the administrative system you have put in place, an equitable administrative system that will ensure the maximum development of the areas and the welfare of the people. So be it, others will copy it. But what you have now is a national disgrace. In the terms, this is without prejudice to what the Constitution, the Supreme Court has done by so-called local government autonomy and all that. You could see that even some people were resisting that autonomy. Now, if you remove the local government from the Constitution, it becomes the responsibility of the states, whatever they want to create. That is their business. And you see, it will bring more pressure on the state governors to find means of developing their state, instead of saying the local government chairman has taken the money and disappeared, or even take it from him or from them indirectly. While the local government chairman will go to prison, the state governor who took it without any documentation will now be walking the street. Well, that is the point we are making.
That clearly suggests you don't agree with the Supreme Court judgment on that matter.
I'm sorry?
You don't agree with the Supreme Court decision on that matter?
I don't agree. The Supreme Court was deciding on the courts are realists. They are not speculators. The Supreme Court decided on the situation as it is on ground now.
Okay.
The court does not speculate on what should be the best. It doesn't go that way. It deals with the matter before it. Right. And that is why some of us are saying, remove this thing. The Supreme Court looked at the way that they fritter away money belonging to them and looked at the Constitution as it is now. That's why I'm also talking about constitutional amendment or change of that area to make sure that we address the critical issue. The amendments that have been going on since 1999 have not taken us anywhere because they have been piecemeal. And if you put together the amount that each time you spend almost 1 billion naira or more to do constitutional amendment. And these amendments, there is nothing fundamental other than you find that some people will sit down and share the money, and that's the end of the day. They'll just come out with 1 or 2 amendments. Well, we can't go on like this as a country because the resources are dwindling. We need to have people who are thinking and who will increase the cake, and not always talking about how to bake, how to share the cake.
All right, Ayo, you looked at some of the provisions too of that, particularly this angle, which Mr. Naj has been talking about. What's your take on it? Ayo, go ahead.
Well, yeah, one of the issues that that's, touches me, mainly from what he has said so far. Well, what you've said so far, sir, is the issue of political permutations, and that's the angle that I'd like you to address. What are the political permutations that you think has to change if the next constitution is going to make any difference? I ask that because I'm looking at, the First Republic, and the 1963 Constitution gave it bite, and it still ended. That republic still ended in 3 years. I'm looking at the Second Republic as well, between 1979 and 1983. It ended. For one reason or the other, it had a constitution that we still refer to as better than the one that we have now. We had the Third Republic as well, which was supposed to be powered by a particular constitution that I don't think ever really got off the ground. And now we're talking about this one, and we've amended it 5 times. So is it really the constitution or the systems that run these constitutions. So what political permutations have to change?
It is the Constitution. The Constitution is the ground norm. Like I said, structure sets the function. You cannot have systems without having a framework. Every system within a framework. And the framework has to be right. If it is wrong, then there will be systemic failures. Take, for example, somebody who is a hunchback person. I don't mean to denigrate anybody. Such person cannot stand up. And there are certain metabolic functions that cannot take place because there is extra pressure on the system. And so forth and so forth. The point I'm making is that if the Constitution is right, every other function, institutions will be stronger. And then the leadership, take for example, the universities. If you go to the university, there are certain things that you are expected. The pre-qualification issue, whether you have WASC or schools, GCE or whatever, there is a presumption that if you have been able to achieve that, then you will be in a position to do some critical thinking and succeed in the academic. It is a framework that has been set. If it is not set, then every Tom, Dick, and Harry will go to the university and be causing trouble. So if a system selects what should succeed and survive and be sustained in the system, anybody who wants to work the system must comply. So when we are saying America is working, developed countries are working, it is the system that is hammered out and made possible by the framework, the ground norm, the Constitution. If you say we the people, nobody should do so and so to the citizen. For example, now, if you are walking the street, somebody can kidnap somebody, and the person that kidnapped may be free because of connection and impunity. But if the Constitution provides a certain leverage for equality of citizen treatment, we have it here in human rights something, but you know, there are more breaches than enforcement of human rights in this country. And it depends on who is at the helm, which is not supposed to be. In our own situation, we depend on whether somebody is strong or somebody is not weak or ethnic oriented and so on. But if the Constitution is hammered out by everybody and we have the buy-in of the critical thinking of the people who are supposed to know, then the processes will be put together and the ground norm itself will be strengthened to make sure that individuals that are operating the institutions are following the rules as they are laid down there.
I still ask the question again, and I'd like you to speak to it as concisely and as simply as possible for Nigerians, particularly young people, to understand. We had a 1963 constitution that many people still say if we went back to it, it would probably make a difference. But that constitution, the republic lasted only 3 years. I'm still maintaining that. This constitution is the one that we have used for the longest democratic experience we've had. 25 years and counting. Previous constitutions never lasted up to 5 years. But this one has lasted us until now. Perhaps we can say it is the resilience of the people. Yes, there is something clearly wrong with whatever it is that we have now, which is making some people, elders such as yourself, to say we need to address it. So it's about the people. That is the way it is coming out. So, okay, so now we're talking about a new constitution now, one that has lasted us the longest democratic experience we ever had. What needs to change? It's the constitution. Is the question that Chamberlain asked the other time. Politicians will still be politicians. They're still the ones that are going to run the same constitution, the same country, and it's the people that are still going to run this constitution. So the political permutations is something that people are still talking about. Are we still going to go into the different regions? Are we going to maintain the system the way it is right now? Are we going to have a unicameral legislature or a bicameral legislature? What exactly needs to change? Are we going to have Supreme Courts at the state levels? What are the structural, soft or hard infrastructure that needs to change if a new constitution will make a difference in our country?
Very well, Ayo. You see, now that we're now bringing it down to that level, my own position is that we don't need the 36 state structure. I've always advocated that you should have the 6. Are you with me?
I'm with you. Please go ahead, sir.
Very well, very well. That we have 6 geographical zones. 6 zones should constitute the federating unit of this country to make life more manageable. The bloated system we run makes the resources so unavailable for development. Now, when we do that and remove this albatross that we call local government and the inequity inherent in that, we are also reducing areas of profligacy, stealing, and corruption. Now, when you have 6 children to look after, it is better and more manageable than when you have 36 and more, because those who want to steal, or let me just say, in a bazaar situation, those who want to rush the food, they want a confused state so that they can use their own strength to empty the bowl of rice, so to speak. Now, if you have 6 zones and local governments and whatever you call them, state or whatever, under the zones, the zonal arrangement, you will have more manageable system. Devolve more powers from the federal government and make the zones very strong. You will have less people going to the federation to make the noise that we have now, killing and all that. And the cost of running an election in this country needs to be addressed so that it is not so much about all the federal people voting individually, because we don't have the same uniformity of a level of education. And nobody can go from here to Naira Namoda to monitor elections there on election day that is a candidate from Edo State or a candidate from Rivers State or a candidate from Lagos State, unless you have some people who are there to work the system for you and you know what that means. So we need to address the electoral processes, electoral system that will work in this country. We need to look at the law enforcement. In the light of these security challenges that we are having, it will be foolhardy to continue to insist on one central command. It is not working. And so even if you talk about police now, who are equipping the police? Is it not the state government? And it becomes a refrain for some of them to say they have spent so and so amount equipping the police, but you don't see some of the results. So that means that the security votes may have been dissipated unfairly. So there are so many things that it's not me that will sit down and hammer out everything. I have my own. If I have to submit a memorandum, I will do that. But what we are doing now, part of which I am doing, is to advocate that those who have been benefiting from the old order must look at what they have benefited, whether they could have benefited more in a new order, and allow the system to work.
But you know, there are those who would remind you.
It's better to have your son in the school, being better educated, than putting him before you to brag to your system, to your people that you have a son. And
Mr. Naji, you know, there are those who would argue, who would postulate with you and say that we have practiced a regional system before. The northern region, the western region, the eastern region, and all of that. And we know where it got us at the time. But now you are proposing that we go back to the regional system. How exactly?
I said zonal. If you call it region, no problem.
Okay. So I don't know how zones differ from regions, but hey, if that is to be, what economic permutations? Yeah. What economic?
They also differ.
Okay. So what economic permutations will change? Because at the end of the day, whatever the policies or politics, it has to be about the economy and how that affects the people. So what economic permutations have to change?
The economy will be addressed because the philosophical bent should be a smaller a federal government and more vibrant and very vibrant zones. Because zones should carry more load now than the federal government. And then the federal government will better focus in an efficient manner the critical functions of federal government all over the world, defense, currency, and the like. instead of going into even agriculture, land, whatever, because those things give room for certain ethnic tendencies. And those people who believe that it is their own person that is at the helm of affairs begin to hammer out a lot of ethnic agenda that they canvass. Even when the person that is at the power may not have bought it, they use that to canvass and intimidate people in the media. And that brings divisions, bitter divisions. We have seen these experiences. The experience of the regions in those, it was not the regions that failed. It was that there were certain rooms that were not covered, certain areas that people exploited it. And that is why it is important to have, after all, you see the way it was hammered, that particular regional constitutions, the way they were hammered, it's not going to be the same way that the experience that we have now, the level of education, the level of experience, the level of pain, the fact that people now know we are going nowhere. If you think that you are headed to the lagoon and you are telling the driver to pedal the car, you are going to commit suicide. And that is what many Nigerians are calling for, that we should not commit this suicide. Let us change course. If you know you are going to Abuja and you have not reached, you have even reached Okene, and you find that you are on your wrong route, actually you were going to Port Harcourt, you need to reverse. Okay. You don't need to continue to hit Abuja just to impress people.
Well, Chamberlain, I would say that this is perhaps the beginning of conversations on this matter, wouldn't you say?
Well, Mr. Naji has raised quite a lot of issues, but you still have people who think, are we sure we're not confusing some things? For instance, if people were not obeying the 1999 Constitution in the breach, we would be way better off than we are today. So they still think, even if you have this new Constitution, what is the guarantee that they will not be the same attitude that people will still bring to the new one?
Generally, that is the problem with Nigerians. We sit down, yes, speculate about why things may not work. But before you set out your trip, if you want to move, the motivation has to be there. If somebody calls one in Lagos to come and take money in Cotonou, the person's thought will not be on whether he will be kidnapped. But if you tell him to come and deliver something to somebody free, he will begin to build reasons why he cannot make that trip. So we need to have that positive motivation. Let's try something new, because the old one is not working. That is the point we are making. Nigerians have become wiser now. The last small protest that went wild eventually demonstrate the level of anger and hunger. And some people now know that those people whom they think were their leaders were not leading them. They were dealers, using them as means of dealing for their own end. So the issue is, let us come to the table.
All right.
Even if nothing else, to see how we can work out a better, you cannot demand patriotism.
All right, Mr. Naji.
You don't demand it. You do it, you take care of the citizens, and they return patriotism.
And just as you said, so that those who want to rush the food do not get the opportunity. All right, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning, Mr. Naji. The good practice.
Thank you very much.
All right, Business Morning comes up now.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. We do about 30 minutes of business before we head back to the Sunrise Daily studio, perhaps to continue that constitution issue with the Sunrise guys. But let's do business now. Starting from the global space, oil prices rebounded on Wednesday after a sharp drop in the previous session ended a 3-day streak of gains as investors have wives between concerns about potential supply losses from Libya and the Middle East and worries about global fuel demand. Take a look at the number now, looking so green. 0.31% up is what we see for Brent, but losing that 81 that we had about this time yesterday, now at $79.80 a barrel. That's for Brent, which Nigeria deals in. For the United States WTI, it's $75.70, dropping from 77 that it had about this time, but gained a little bit, recovered a bit of what some of those losses. 0.23% is what we see, and prices are bouncing back from Tuesday's more than 2% decline, which snapped a 3-day streak of gains of more than 7%, as concerns about low refinery profit margins weighed on expectations for fuel demand amid data showing global consumption growth has been lower than forecast this year. The market was also supported by industry data released on Tuesday showing that the United States oil and fuel inventories fell last week. However, the biggest risks remain the potential loss of supply in Libya, where about 1.2 million barrels per day of production may be shut in amid a political dispute between rival government factions and an escalation of the Israel-Gaza conflict to involve militants in Lebanon and forces from Iran, which is a key Middle East producer. Several oil fields across Libya have altered output as closures spread amid a dispute over control of the central bank and oil revenue. There's still been no confirmation of any closures from the Tripoli-based government or from the National Oil Corps, which is in charge of oil resources. We look at the Naira now and see how it fared yesterday. We see for NAFEM, it was just a little bit of drop that we see there. There was mismatch between demand and supply, and so NAFEM had an appreciation yesterday to close at 1,594 Naira 27 kobo, while it was the flip side for NAFEX. We see the drop there, so going from 1,598 Naira 4 kobo to 1,602 Naira 6 kobo. And I think this captures what happened at the parallel market yesterday. I think it closed about 1,006 in the parallel market, but we still have 1,500, 1,594 Naira for NAFEM at the close. So a little bit of movement right there, but still around the window that we have been seeing for the market for some time now. Now, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the FIRS, has established a 12-member anti-corruption and transparency unit. They call it ACTU, and it's to promote accountability within the agency. The unit, inaugurated by the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, the ICPC, is tasked with ensuring zero tolerance for corruption in tax collection. The FIRS chairman, Mr. Zach Adedeji, through his representative, emphasized that their role is crucial in maintaining public trust in the tax system. The ICPC has pledged its support to the FIRS ACTU, highlighting the unit's responsibility to monitor and improve the agency's processes, ensuring ethical conduct across all operations. Now, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, has granted 6 states in the country the authority to regulate the electricity market. In a statement posted on its X page, the electricity market regulator listed states as Enugu, Ekiti, Imo, Ondo, Oyo and Edo State. Well, NERC explains that the new regulatory measure can be referred to as the Order of Transfer of Regulatory Oversight of the Electricity Market to the State Electricity Regulatory Commission, now not NERC but SERC. The Commission earlier announced in April that it had handed off the electricity regulatory oversight of Enugu, Imo, Ekiti and Ondo power companies with effect from May 1 of this year. Back in Lagos, the Nigerian National Petroleum, beg your pardon, not the Nigerian National, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry has opened its 2024 conference. They call it Invest Nigeria, bringing together members of the business community, both from Nigeria and outside the country. And we also have the governor of Lagos State there, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu. Invest Nigeria Expo for 2024 is an initiative of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry in collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well as the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. For LCCI, the conference is pivotal towards stabilizing the economy and driving sustainable economic growth and development.
His Excellency, the Governor of Lagos State.
Lagos State Governor Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu is here, and for him, driving a sustainable economic growth requires development of infrastructure.
Our administration has implemented and continue to implement policies and initiatives that will attract investment, retain investment, and let investment flourish and grow in our country. We're building the largest logistics food security hub in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. We see and we realize that we need to feed the over 20 million population that we have. And we say to ourselves that one of the ways to secure the tomorrow is to make sure that food security, which is one of the major security challenges that we have in the world, Lagos can build a logistics hub that can keep almost 90 to 120 days of supply on both dry and food stock. And so we're looking for opportunity and collaboration, as we complete that investment and ensuring that, we can keep Lagos safe, we can provide for the needs of Lagosians, and we can use agriculture as a strong, enabler on that.
Even more reasons for investors to look the way of Nigeria, especially the blue economy. The minister outlines attractions.
I encourage the business community to take advantage of the incentive, such as the Pioneer Status Incentive, which grant tax holidays up to 5 years for businesses in strategic sectors. Others include a range of tax incentives, such as exemption of interest on loan, deduction for research and development, reconstruction investment allowance, and rural investment allowance. There are also trade and investment promotion incentives into which investors in the marine and blue economy can tap. They include free transferability of capital returns, protection against nationalization, and recourse to international arbitration.
The International Business Conference and Expo Invest Nigeria, which is holding on August 27 and 28, is, according to LCCI, set to strengthen partnerships with the international business community and tell the world that Nigeria is open for business. Nigeria is open for business indeed. Now, yesterday we did take this story of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, that they've started shipment of liquefied natural gas cargoes to Japan and China, and it's being delivered on ex-ship DES basis. And NNPC Limited achieved this milestone through collaboration with two of its downstream subsidiaries, which is the NNPC LNG and NNPC Shipping, which delivered its first DES LNG cargo from 174,000 metric tons to Futsu in Japan, and they started all the way in June and all of that. And having this conversation even behind the camera, one of the questions that some Nigerians have been asking is, are we done? Are we satisfied with the supply to the domestic market? Have we met domestic demand before we start talking of exports? But let's talk to someone. I mean, we're looking for FX also, and this is one way of it. So, perhaps that's the reason. But now let's speak to the Business Development Director at Cypher Crescent Limited, Mr. Anyeka Udo, joins us virtually from Port Harcourt in Rivers State. Mr. Udo, good morning, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me on the program.
Great. So the first thing I'd like for you to respond to is the worry that we are exporting when we haven't met domestic demand.
Okay, I think it's here and there. Can we say we have not met domestic demand? Gas utilization in Nigeria is increasing. As you may know, we currently produce about 7.8 billion cubic feet on a daily basis, while we re-inject in the fields about 2.2 billion. Domestic demand or consumption stands at about 1.5 billion cubic feet per day, and we have an excess of that. So it is very important that we find a commercial engagement to export, because for us to increase in-country utilization, in-country consumption, we need to expand the facility in which we can get the gas from the point of production, the processing down to the consumers. And these are very capital intensive projects. So it is a step in the right direction by the government, and we give a right commendation to the government for expanding its commercial engagement to bring in more foreign exchange so that we need the money from the exports to build in, develop capacity, infrastructural capacity in country. You are quite aware of the gigantic gas pipeline project, the transatlantic and the African, trans-Saharan and the African Atlantic gas pipelines that are ongoing. These are huge projects, and so the export is in the right direction. And before now, of course, I want to say that the government has been, Nigeria has been exporting gas. Only that the terms has changed. We've been exporting gas on the basis of free on board, which means that we just pump in the gas in the vessels, and the importers, the countries of destination take charge of the risk. And of course, less money coming to the country. So what you are seeing now is Nigeria, NNPC now getting involved, taking the risk by what we call delivered ex-ship. So it means that the country earns a lot of more revenue because we are now involved in the insurance and the shipping and all that. So it is a step in the right direction. Internal consumption, in-country consumption in gas is growing. We cannot say we've not met domestic demand so far. Demand is growing. We have in excess of, we are producing in excess of domestic demand. So it is important that we balance home consumption and export so that the country can earn enough resources to expand facilities and infrastructure in making sure that gas gets to the right quarters within the country.
Yeah, but if we are producing in excess of domestic demand, why do we still record surge in price of LPG, cooking gas, and all of that? Even the conversion, CNG, we don't see a lot of people embracing it because, of course, there's been a surge in price also. So what's happening in the domestic front?
Yeah, of course, these are traded in international markets, and we, of course, you're aware that subsidy has ended, and these are open to international forces of demand and supply. Because for you to do the conversion, you need a lot of investment in infrastructure. You have the LNG, which you have to compress liquefied gas up to 600 times of the volume of what it will be in gas, and it's transported under high pressure. You're aware of the heavy investment in LNG. Even the CNG, you need to really compress it, to up to 200 to 250 bar above atmospheric pressure, and the transportation. These are very capital intensive projects. So it is easier for the meantime that you distribute the production and give to local consumption what our facility can take for now. You're not going to waste it. Are you going to flare it? Where are you going to store it? So you need to transport it. And the investment in gas before the decade of gas that we declared had been very limited. Of course, we are aware of the global concerns about the environmental impact of hydrocarbon, meaning that investments in fossil fuel is being challenged. So every country like Nigeria who is blessed with the deposits of natural gas needs to find a way to generate enough capital to be able to build infrastructure so that you can intensify and expand local consumption. So what you have at the moment is that the Nigerian gas is being traded at an international price. You're aware of the global dynamics of prices in the international space affecting gas supplies internationally. So that surges the price. And Nigeria is not exempted because of the current policies of the federal government, which opens up the market so that it can also attract investors in that area.
I guess Nigerians would have been happier or more comfortable if they had the assurance that, okay, there's infrastructural need, to meet with the domestic demands, but we are doing this export to channel the revenue into that infrastructural gap so that, in no time, then you have that met. But I mean, I don't think we're hearing that, even though we hear the government talking a whole lot about its decade of gas and gas master plan and all.
Yeah, you are aware of the investment in the gas master plan. currently the AKK project, which is also to improve exports, because why you seem to see a lot of we are a gas country, like we do say, we are a gas bearing country, a gas country with some oil. We have over 209 trillion cubic feet of gas, which is proven reserve. So what do we do with that? And you have a concern also that of the renewables almost coming on board in some spaces across the world. So that means that in the next few years, in some years to come, you may not have a good demand for gas. So you need to deplete. You need to produce, you need to increase your production. And when you increase your production and you do not have enough infrastructure in the country to process and utilize, what do you do? So you need the money from fossil fuel to transit alongside the world. We need the money, it's capital intensive. So we need to ramp up production at the moment. We need more exports, commercial deals for the country. And we need also at the same time to intensify capacity building for in-country utilization. So this must go hand in hand. You cannot suspend one and leave the other. We are also aware of certain initiatives by government, including executive orders to ensure that investments are ramped up in that area so that we can improve gas utilization in country in no distant time.
So, I mean, there's PPP, which could help in this case. You talked about the cost of conversion, which is another discouraging factor from it. And even this issue of infrastructure in that space, do you see enough drive, even if it's through the PPP, in filling these gaps, whether it's the conversion, whether it's the infrastructure that is needed and all of that, and even the reorientation that the people need if we really want to embrace the renewables and gas in the middle of it?
Yeah, when there's demand and the right environment, investment is being attracted. And there is a need, the demand for energy in Nigeria is increasing. The rising cost of PMS has also made that we are now talking about CNG and all that. And we are seeing, as far as we're concerned, I think the policies so far are investment friendly. So the private players are getting more interested, in investing in the industry. So we think it is in the right direction, provided we can sustain some of the policies and also make ease of doing business, improve ease of doing business. So we stand to see more investment coming into that area. Although globally, like you would observe, there's been declining investments in fossil fuel processing. But at the same time, you can see globally there is an increased need in energy across the world. So meaning that we need to balance this. And Nigeria being blessed with a lot of deposits that are reserved in gas resources, we believe that this is going to attract private participation more than what we are seeing in due cost. And the initial cost, I think what we are seeing is that we are running almost on a very limited infrastructure. By the time the country improves infrastructure and steps on infrastructure to the level that the new entrants, all you need to do is probably most of your costs should be in the processing cost, not infrastructure development, which is very capital intensive. This, I would believe, would see prices of conversion, prices of processing come down to the extent that the prices for the final consumer will eventually begin to come down.
So you talked about a sustainable policy on the one hand. You also talked about, having more players there, the ease of doing business. If you were to point one or two policies that you think should be given attention at this time, for this proliferation of gas, which ones would you suggest? Yeah,
we've seen the executive order that seems to reduce taxes, levies on companies that are playing in gas infrastructure development. So that is a step in the right direction. And because if we improve gas utilization in the country, I think it's one criterion that can really spark Nigeria's industrial revolution, so to speak. So we would like to see more of encouragement, more of duty relaxation, tax prepared to countries or to companies who are directly, involved in the processing, development of infrastructure, development of technologies, for development of gas resources in Nigeria. That will really help to speed up the utilization of gas in country, expansion or proliferation of industries that are currently struggling with energy costs. That will really be very helpful.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Nyekanudo, for your perspective this morning. I would certainly hope that we would see those gaps and those policies being given attention to drive more of gas usage in the country. Thank you, and do enjoy the rest of your day.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Let's take a break now. When we come back from that break, we'll come back, of course, with the market numbers, how it closed yesterday before we head back to the Sunrise Daily Studio. But let's take a commercial break. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to Watching Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. A bit of market numbers now from yesterday. We see that the market, the NGX, Nigeria Stock Exchange, retained that green color for a second trading day. Even though I did see a news, we'll give you more on that on subsequent programs, that the foreign intervention or foreign interaction at the NGX has reduced, I think, for the second quarter. All that, we'll give you details of that later. But it seems the local investors are driving the market in spite of a reduction of foreign investors. So yesterday, the market closed positive again, 96,510.13. It gained 0.49%, and 272 billion naira was added to the market cap. And then the market cap is still at 55.437 trillion naira. Driver yesterday, I think, came from the oil and gas counter. Huge move there. We see banking, yes, did well. The Fugas, Zenith Bank and First Bank and all of that. Consumer goods also was up 0.45%. Industrial goods slightly up. Insurance, the penny stocks gaining momentum and growing right there. But oil and gas is really where to look at this time. We've seen consistent gain on that counter. O&O has been top on the news since they finished that acquisition of Ajip Nigeria. It seems investors just want to get a share of it. So we've seen O&O driving that. Seplat did join this time. Eternal Oil also did join. And so we see that the oil and gas counter was up 4.14%. I don't know if it's too late for you to cut a bit of the share of that gains from O&O. Perhaps you just have to consult to find out what that is about. And then looking at the top trades at the NGX at the close of Tuesday, straight Veriscap. Veriscap is, we've seen it for a second consecutive day now in the top trades. So whether a penny stock or not. And so you see the reason why the insurance counter was in the green yesterday. Accessco, part of the Fugas, gained, of course, yesterday and made the top trades at the close of trade. So it's an interesting market. That's the NGX at this time, even though the foreign investors seem to be, losing a bit of steam in their participation at the NGX. The local investors are taking their places there. And so that's why we saw a green market for a second trading day this week. Now, look at the smaller market, the NASD. And we see it also green, very green, in fact, gained 4.12% at 1,641.4. Market cap has crossed to 2 trillion naira, so 2.25 trillion naira. And for the activity chart, it was all green yesterday. From the volume was up 162. One of these days, I think we should really do a conversation on this market. 162, more than 162% increase in volume as well as value is something to look out for. So it might be a smaller market, but they're also getting some attention. 78 deals yesterday and 8 stocks traded at the close of Tuesday's trade. We do promise you a fuller conversation on the market as well as other business and economic issues. That'll be on Business Incorporated. You know the way we do it at 1 p.m. I'll be here with Anita Edet and we'll take you around the world of business in 55 minutes to give you the details that you need to know. For now, let's head back to the Sunrise Daily studio.
You don't solve a problem by running away from it. You must first acknowledge that there is a problem. It is after that you now sit down and discuss how to resolve or settle the problem. But I start with the issue of allegation of these 2 million. You see, I am not defending the EFCC. Please take that. And I am not afraid to come out against them. But I always want us to get our facts right. I have invited you to please come and help us. And I believe that you will come out and help us. I assure you that if the facts are established, appropriate law will be applied. So on the issue of auditing of is it oil contract, I don't want to be mentioning names. I want to assure you that that is currently ongoing. There are some things you embark upon without making any noise. You will hear about the outcome when it is time.
Welcome back. Mr. Adegboyega Awomolo joins us next. He is a senior advocate of Nigeria and chairman, Body of Benchers. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay, so there are still conversations going on as to interpretation of execution of the Supreme Court judgment concerning the local government. I know there's a lot of judicial reforms narrative as well. But this morning, we had also a senior lawyer, Mr. Naji, whose perspective, he didn't quite agree with that Supreme Court decision on local government, saying it essentially confers 3 tiers of government, which is doesn't obtain anywhere. So if you could just give us that broad perspective about your thoughts on implementation of that particular judgment, because we know that even some governors still quietly not exactly happy about it. What is your impression of that particular decision and how it should be operationalized?
Thank you. Let me start from the foundation. Before 1979, Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, there was what is called federalism of 2 tiers government. In other words, the national government and the subnational, that's the states. But since 1976 local government reform, the concept of 3 governments emerged. So in the 1979 Constitution, we had federal government, state government, and local government councils. In other words, by our 1979 and 1999 constitution, we had 3 tiers of government. So the principle, the global principle of 2 tiers of government in a federation became unknown to Nigeria, because the Constitution of Federal Republic of Nigeria is the ground norm, is the foundational law upon which every other law is based. So from 1999, we have been operating 3 tiers of government. That is why Section 1 of the Constitution provides that there shall be state, federal government, states, and local governments. And the local government is also provided for in the Constitution. Now, if we are talking about the effect of the judgment of the Supreme Court delivered on the 11th of July, I believe that the judgment established 3 main principles, broad main principles. That is, 1, Nigeria has 3 tiers of government: the federal, the state, and the local government. And by Section 162, each of these tiers of government is entitled to draw from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation, called Federation Account, monthly revenues for the maintenance of the government. And the National Assembly, exercising its power under the Constitution, also made laws that devise the percentage of drawings of federal, state, and local government. See, what happened before 11th of July was that the states of the Federation were used as the conduit pipe, or the transit pipe, or the transit media, by which funds due to local governments were transmitted or transferred. And the states were expected to distribute to the local governments each of the funds allocation to each of the local governments. In other words, the state governments were not to be managers of the fund, they were not to be custodians of the fund, and they were not to interfere. So, unfortunately, the experience over the years has been that the state governments appropriated, managed, and unfortunately were not particularly too transparent in the disbursement of the funds to local governments. There was several decisions whereby the local state governments were accused of appropriating to themselves the fund due to local government. So the first principle in the judgment of Honorable Justice Emmanuel Akomaya Agim, Justice of the Supreme Court, delivered on the...
All right, so we lost that connection. We'll just get it back sooner rather than later, so we can get back to that conversation. But clearly, just trying to make his point about giving us some historical background such that we can then understand where we are at the moment. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Umolo. We lost you for a moment there, sir.
We now receive directly from the Federation account monies due to them. In other words, the provisions of the Constitution, which provided that funds should be passed through the states, have become inoperable. You can no longer operate it, and therefore the Supreme Court, in its interpretative power, it has that power to do so. Now say, look, pay it to the recipients directly. That's the first point. The second point, established by that judgment, is the independence, autonomy of each of these local government as a tier of government under the Constitution. In other words, just as the federal government cannot control the affairs of the state government also have limited control of the tenure, election, and life and management, finances, or administration of the local government. Before now, each of the states or the federations have what is called local government laws. These local government laws make provisions for finances, administration, functions, and responsibilities. But if we look at the effect of the judgment, is that no governor, no state government has power over the administration, finances, and tenure of local governments in Nigeria. So if there is any law made by the House of Assembly that give the power to governor or to the House of Assembly to remove chairmen of local governments or councillors, that has become obsolete and no longer effective. So in other words, the tenure of elected officials, not appointed, elected officials of local government has their tenure, and that tenure must be run fully. So the issue of, caretaker government, whatever nomenclature they call it, is now obsolete, is no longer relevant, is no longer constitutional, and anyone who operates such system is going against the spirit of the Constitution.
Mr. Womolo.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we're going to be able to get your thoughts on two things. One of them, the calls for a new constitution. We're hearing the Patriots, and that was what informed the conversation we had in the first part of the program. What are your thoughts on the need for a brand new constitution? And then secondly, just so we can understand, we're looking at judicial reforms. You're the chair of the body of benchers. In your view, what changes, what sort of reform should we be seeing in the judiciary in, let's say, the next 1 year?
Well, let me answer the first question, which is to the effect of new constitution. If somebody says, this thing has never been done before, and therefore it cannot be done, he must be living in the 18th century or 15th century. Nothing is impossible, provided we follow the due process. My take is that, the National Assembly and the House of Assembly of States have the power to alter, to amend, or to bring about a new constitution. I want to believe that efforts have been made in the past for constitutional conferences, whereby recommendations were made for new constitutions. Yes, the Constitution of 1999 has its own flaws, and no constitution is absolutely free from flaws all over the world. But by means of amendments, all the flaws, all the defects are taken off. Whatever form the new constitution will take is a matter for Nigerians, either through plebiscite or through electoral reforms or whatever forms. So my view is that it is not an impossibility in a human endeavor to have a complete turnover, a complete change of direction, including application of constitutions. So those who are agitating, they have their points, and I have nothing against it. For the other one, you are talking about judicial reforms. You will recall that some few months ago, the Attorney General of the Federation, the Nigerian Bar Association, National Judicial Council, and all stakeholders had a conference whereby, the existing infrastructure, existing provisions, existing practices, existing norms, existing laws relating to administration of justice in Nigeria were all considered. And it was a robust argument, robust discussions, and very useful conclusions were made. I am aware that a technical committee was set up by the Attorney General to review and collate these various views. Our judicial system is not perfect. When you talk about even the functions of courts, if you look at the amount of burden that political decision puts on our courts, and if you look at the amount of waste of resources that these political decisions generate, now, I want to subscribe to the idea that there's need to reform our judicial system and the administration of justice in general. For instance, I'm one of those who believe that our courts have no business in many cases that come to court, particularly the Supreme Court. And before the military took over, each of the states or regions of the Federation, they had their hierarchy of courts. and Western Nigeria then had courts of appeal. So if the military did not interrupt the progression of development, all the states of the federation should have their court of appeal where matters end, unless issues of life, consentence, national currency or security, or such matters that are in the explicit legislative list. Now, I believe that the new Chief Justice of Nigeria, the Attorney General of the Federation, and all stakeholders will come together to give effects to the various decisions that were made and suggestions that came up during the conference. I'm talking about the Judicial Reform Conference. I attended, and I appreciate the contributions of all the stakeholders. So the body of benchers agree that there's need for us to reform our judicial system. We also agree that certain procedures and practices ought to be reviewed. Take, for example, appointment of judicial officers. There's need for us to review it. Take, for example, also the issue of remuneration of judicial officers. It ought not to be the responsibility of National Revenue Mobilization Fiscal Commission. Where is the National Judicial Council there? It is the responsibility of the National Judicial Council to make provisions, to regulate, and to, from time to time, deal with issues of remuneration, condition of service of judicial officers all over the Federation. And we must warn ourselves. Yes, the new tiers of government will also mean that we have to review the whole process from the local government to the states and federal, and then the national, which is Supreme Court, that binds all of us. Indeed, I want to believe that our 6 zones created in 1995 or whatever by General Abacha should be made a part of our constitution. And each of the zones could maintain a Supreme Court whereby all issues end in the zonal Supreme Courts, except those that are related to the Constitution interpretation, which is a matter beyond the states or zones. So there are so many areas of reforms that we need to look at.
Just so we can manage the time properly, I was reading an article that you wrote, a response from you when the conversation about judicial reforms came up. And I'm going to quote you. You said political interference is the biggest issue when it comes to the administration of justice, especially with the judiciary. What do you think can be done about that political interference? And political interference from who in particular?
Well, let me confess to you, in Nigeria today, we have three arms of government: the executive, the legislature, and judiciary. Judiciary is the only arm of government that is not occupied by judicial appointees, judicial elected officials, and politicians. And if you want to know where the interference is coming from, you can see that professionals who are not politicians cannot be accused of political interference with themselves. But let me confess to you, as it was in the beginning, now, and even almost, if not forever, the political interference has always been. It's only judiciary that can release themselves from the clutches. But then we need to be aware that politicians interfere with our administration of justice, particularly when it has to do with political matters. You see, politicians can boast to you, we gave 1 billion naira, $1 million, that to get judgment. And they are very loud in saying it, but unfortunately, call them to come and prove it, they will be reluctant or they will disappear. There's no doubt that corruption is part of the major problems of our time, our age. So interference, including corrupting influence by politicians of our judicial officers. You will recall some years ago, some judicial officers were accused of having so much money in their homes, and it was believed to have been a process of undue influence or political interference. But look, in judiciary today, we can beat our chest and say there are many judicial officers who are of integrity, who are of learning, and who can be trusted with the administration of justice. But We must maintain the integrity, the honor of these offices by distancing ourselves from politicians. In the old, judges don't go to parties, open parties. They hardly relate or mingle with politicians. This just to avoid all this type of inferences. And you know, the Nigerians were easy and quickly make our inferences and perceptions. And perceptions in judicial matters is very key because justice is rooted in confidence. Justice is rooted, once there is a belief in some quarters, you know, and these days of social media, we're in big trouble. So what we need to do is to insulate our judicial officers from relating or mingling with politicians, or as little as they can, so that interference by political parties or political bigwigs will be removed from our public perceptions of judiciary.
I mean, that's a very instructive statement that you just made there. Justice is rooted in confidence, and building that
Indeed
confidence in the judiciary is a very crucial part of our development as a country. I'm going to toss it to Ayo right now, who has a few questions for you. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kayla. One, I'm just going to go straight to the Constitution. I think it's Section 7, sub 6B, is the one that says that the House of Assembly of a state shall make provisions for statutory allocation of public revenue to local government councils within the state. Now, the question is whether or not this happens. And with the ruling of the Supreme Court, how does that happen?
You know, we must separate the revenue coming from the national federal federation account. We must separate it from the one that is generated by the states. You see, because of the peculiarity of the local governments, they cater more for more issues like education, like health, and agriculture, the welfare of the people of the state or in the local government. Therefore, the states are expected to give certain percentage of revenue generated in the states to the local governments within the state. You see, that is what that Section 7 is talking about. The state have a duty not only to receive as it was before, but now taken away from them, but they also have a duty to share. The federal government share revenue from customs, from immigrations, from national oil, NNPCPLs, and all the revenue avenues with the states and local government. The states also generate so much revenue, particularly from taxes, from all sorts of forms. And the states are obliged to share certain percentage with the local government. But whether that is being done or that's not being done is a matter for another day. But when I was a commissioner, Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice 1992 to 93, I know that every month the Commissioner for Finance and officers of the local governments gathered at Oshogbo to share the revenue that that were derived from the state. And at that time, it was the late Governor Adeleke, Ishak Adeleke, who was the governor. And he kept strictly to the constitutional provision. I don't know what has happened thereafter. But if the judgment of the Supreme Court is anything to go by, the states have defaulted in this responsibility. The states have breached the confidence as trustee of the fund of the local government. So the decision of the local government of the Supreme Court has changed the trajectory.
Whether or not
there is that decision or argument,
yes,
whether the judgment of the Supreme Court can be enforced. I can tell you that's item 57 of the exclusive list of the Constitution gives the National Assembly exclusive right to make laws with respect to execution of judgments all over Nigeria. And there's what is called Sheriff and Civil Process Act made by National Assembly. By that law, any judgment can be enforced anywhere. And in any event, the provisions of Constitution says that the judgment of the Supreme Court shall be enforced by all subordinate courts in the Federation. So let nobody deceive himself.
Well,
there are provisions and penalties for disobeying court order.
Well,
and
the thing
orders
really
of Supreme Court
is,
are final.
perhaps one of the issues here, sir, is, I mean, every governor, every elected official swore to obey the Constitution. Now, quickly to the issue of education that you talked about there, my mind goes straight to what the Constitution says in the 4th schedule, which section 2 of that 4th schedule says that the functions of a local government shall include participation of such council in the government of a state. Participation, and it listed, first on that list is the provision and maintenance of primary, adult, and vocational education. So essentially, it's more of a participatory function as opposed to being the one to fully take charge. Consequently, it is expected that the states themselves will make certain contributions into the purse, speaking about education and 3 other things that are listed there. Now, there are those who are arguing whether or not the function of paying school teachers, particularly primary school teachers, should be that of the state or the local government. By this provision of the Constitution, and in the light of the ruling of the Supreme Court, what is your take about how we, interpret this particular provision of the Constitution and execute it?
Thank you. I am conscious of the fact that these provisions you have just read out is likely to be taken to the Supreme Court again for interpretation. When you are saying that local government should participate, the state has responsibility again in matters of education and health. So it is not necessarily the full responsibility of the local government. But because the primary education is at the heart of the responsibility of the local government, they are not merely participants. They are merely executors of education, health, and basic needs of the common people, like the roads, like agric, and such other issues. I want to believe that the state cannot, by reason of this judgment, abdicate the responsibility of education. After all, there's that national program on education funded by the federal government, and it comes to the state, and the states have no responsibility for primary education. For secondary education, yes. And the federal government practiced in the last few years have been to encourage primary education at the local level. And my view is that the states have a duty to continue to take fair share or larger responsibilities for funding of the primary education. I am aware that in a state in Nigeria has said, oh, the state will no longer fund primary education in the states. Therefore, all the teachers of the in primary schools were now the responsibility of the local government. That would not be right, in my view, because there are so many legislations and practices and such other structures that makes the state a primary or a major share of responsibility for primary education. And if the states pull in for too much, if they try to extricate themselves, therefore the National Assembly may have to amend the allocation and percentages so that the state will have more money to cater for the primary education, and maybe the state may have to lose about 5% of its revenue, of its national revenue, to go to local governments for purpose. So it's an ongoing discussion and conversation. I'm sure that this judgment of Supreme Court is a revolution, and in many ways it will affect many practices existing now. The states, I'm sure, are bitter about this. They are not particularly comfortable with it, but they are bound by it because you can't appeal against it.
I guess, just as you have said, sir, that the fact that this issue has to go back to the Supreme Court is a very, very interesting one, especially when every state attorney general is a lawyer and who expectedly should understand the Constitution. But hey, perhaps it's ongoing conversations, Chamberlain?
Well, yes, unfortunately, we have to let Mr. Awomolo go. Always very interesting, but I'm sure that as the days progress, we need to get a lot more from you, sir, moving forward. So we do thank you very much indeed for your time this morning, sir.
Thank you very much. God bless Nigeria. God bless Channel Television and its staff. Good morning.
Sir. All right, sir. Okay, so we do have some messages that has come through the usual suspect. Professor Naira, we see you, and Festus. Okay, Kela, which one do you want to take first?
Victor was making fun of me. Victor says, Barrister Chimanaji must drop proverbs. Kela Megwa will never understand. All right, but we have this one here from Festus Akimboyewa. Says, a new constitution for our country is a good, ambitious project, but why spend money and time on a new constitution when we can improve how the current constitution works through amendments by our representatives in the National Assembly? Those canvassing for a new constitution should send their recommendations to the National Assembly, who are currently looking into amendment of the current constitution.
I'm still thinking, should I agree with Victor or not? Prof. Enahena, he says, we must have an agreeable conversation to devolve powers from the center, from regions to states, through a referendum or constitutional amendments. This will address regional agitations and the sudden clamor for coup to topple constitutional democracy.
Can we take one more?
I think we have an email. Do we still have it?
I think there's one from Adeolu Ojo, PhD. He says, I think we're substantially undermining the significance of national orientation and attitudinal disposition. Nigeria is not suffering from a dearth of laws and regulations, but from a lack of willingness to implement them. Bring a constitution written in heaven, and Nigerians will find a way to undermine and circumvent it. Have you ever wondered why the same Nigerians who are so lawless here become compliant and law-abiding once they step outside our shores? You see, until we change our national orientation and let people know that there are consequences for our actions and or inactions, we will never be free of brazen disregard for law and order.
Well, Falodun from Ekiti, we also got your messages. Thank you all for sending them in. Well, that is the show today. Well, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Asaf. Goodbye.
Have a great day ahead. I'm Kayla Magwa.
Well, the jury is still out whether or not to agree with you, Victor, but hey, maybe until tomorrow. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.